thank you all for being here this morning, for your briefing document and your opening statement. Before I get into my questions, I just think it's important to make the point, and I know that 𝐷RAVA very much believe that foster care is always preferable, but the reality is we're always going to need a level of residential care services, and the question on that really is who is going to deliver those services. And it is my firm belief that if we do not fund the voluntary and community sector to meet its basic costs and not have it relying on fundraising efforts, which frankly is embarrassing that you'd be put in that position. If we do not do that, then we are going to leave it to private operators to take over. And that is something that we should not countenance, and it's something that we should not allow to happen any further than it already has. And that will be my firm belief. I want to ask firstly in relation to the commitment that was made by 𝐂𝐨 in terms of their plan to expand capacity within the voluntary and community sector. I presume, given 𝐂𝐨 were clear in terms of the number of beds they wanted to expand with in your sector, they would have engaged with 𝐷RAVA intensively in relation to that and how it was going to work, and that there would have naturally, if that was their intention, been funding made available. None of you have funds in your back pocket to build capacity and extend your services. So what level of engagement has been there with 𝐂𝐨 on this?
I might start that Deputy, in relation to the strategic, the strategy for residential care that was published and launched in 2022. There was no engagement with the voluntary sector on that. 31 beds were allocated to the sector, but there was no engagement either before, during or after the strategy was published. The fundamental flaw in that was that the voluntary sector have no access to capital funding. To increase bed numbers, you need to increase the number of properties. So without the capital funding from the get-go, it was impossible for us to increase by even a single bed. So that was the fundamental issue there in relation to that. We were absolutely in line with the ambition to increase the number of beds. It was 110 beds over the 4-year period of the strategy. Unfortunately, we weren't able to be an active partner in that because, as I say, fundamentally we had no access to funds to increase beds. So the result of that was, between 2022 when it was launched and today, we didn't increase by a single bed in that time.
It's very strange to put forward an intention to expand the sector without engaging with the sector, and obviously you're not gathering money. In terms of the money you get is to provide the services that you provide. You don't hold on to that to build capacity. So obviously if the funding wasn't going to be made available, you were never ever going to be in a position, any of you, to expand.
No, that's true to say. I mean, and it'll come up again, and my colleagues will speak to this. One of the fundamental issues there is in the different models that exist within the system currently. So we have an alternative care system, which should be an organic, holistic system, which basically feeds off. We have 2 different funding models. So us as voluntary organisations are on an SLA, service level agreement model, where we're giving a certain amount of money without negotiation, and we have to provide whatever service we can with that. On the for-profit model, it's a commissioning model where the government pay, or through 𝐂𝐨 as an agency, for each bed. So each bed is costed based on the particular need. So they're 2 very different models. The SLA, service level agreement model, give us no flexibility.
And has there been a cost-benefit analysis on behalf of the department in terms of the cost for the for-profit model versus what you would need to run your service and be sustained?
Not that we're aware of. I mean, there are ongoing comparisons of cost per child per week between voluntary and private providers, which really achieves nothing, because you can't simply compare the cost. You've got to do an analysis in terms of the social benefits. So what are the outcomes? So, it would be easy enough to say that from our perspective, our focus is purely on outcomes for children and young people. Income is not part of it. We don't make a profit. But I mean, the fundamental question has to be asked: if we have a care system where in one place our sector aren't paid for the service we provide by the state, another sector can make a profit from the state funding, then that's the anomaly that really we feel needs to be addressed. And again, this is not being critical of individual organisations, it's being critical of a structure and a system that has 2 different methods of payment, one which allows profit to be made, one which actually doesn't even cover the full cost of service, which is the situation we're in. But I'll pass to any colleague who wants to.
I just think, just in terms of, I think it's fair to state that we did expand. We did open a second service in 2023. I suppose the anomaly for us is that the property that we are currently situated in was handed over to the state as part of the redress. So it is actually TUSLA property. So they were willing to give capital funding for us to expand. So we did open 4 additional beds in 2023. Just
to clarify that, as Roisin said, so because it was a TUSLA property.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
It wasn't a voluntary owned property.
And I think a lot of voluntary providers put in proposals in 2023 to increase capacity, and it never progressed after our proposals went in.
Okay. I think that speaks to the fact that money isn't really an issue. Money is there if you're for profit and you're private, but it's not necessarily there if you're voluntary, you're meeting the regulations, you're being inspected, you're accountable for every red cent, as you all are, in terms of every red cent that you receive. So there's a question mark over that. I've been really concerned to learn of eyes on Ireland in terms of internationally Ireland being looked at as a place where money can be made on the back of our care system. And given all of you are in those circles in that world, is that something any of you have come across in terms of Ireland being looked at now as a place to make profit on the back of our most vulnerable children who are the responsibility of the state?
I think if we're honest, we have to say it obviously is, because there are profits that can be made. And I think, a cursory kind of look at this would say, when you look at the kind of businesses that are actually moved into the care sector, there are commercial businesses in building and development, in all kinds of commercial business that have actually now moved across and also had a side business in care, which would tell us that obviously there's an attraction there to come in and make profits. And it's not just confined to the care of children. We've seen this happening in the care of older people in early years. The private companies will move where there's profits to be made. So, we have to compete with that as well. And we have to understand their motivation for doing it. Our concern is that we should not be commodifying children who are specifically in the care of the state. The state, every child, regardless of their challenges, be it disability or others, deserve every support the state can give. But the cohort of children young people we're dealing with are actually de facto, the state is the corporate parent. They don't have, in many cases, families who can advocate appropriately for them. So they are fully reliant on the state to implement their duty of care as a prudent parent. And we feel that the state has failed to do that and failed to properly plan and properly invest in a system that actually meets the needs of every child. We've been in an emergency situation for...
We'll come back.